Welcome. The Ace of Cups, we have Diane Vitalich, who plays drums, Mary Gannon, who is a multi-instrumentalist.
That's right.
Bass, keyboards, ukulele,
yeah,
and Denise,
tambourine.
And tambourine.
Yeah.
And clapping.
Yeah.
And Denise Kaufman, who now plays bass, but you also play guitar and harmonica. Yeah. Welcome. Well, just for a little bit of recap in case people haven't been paying attention to what's going on in the world. The Ace of Cups, one of the first all-women rock and roll bands, shared the stage with many of the bands that I've just been playing in the first set from San Francisco on the test of time. Despite their major contribution to the music scene and around the Summer of Love in San Francisco, they weren't offered a record deal. 50 years later, this injustice has been rectified, and the release of their first self-titled album on Half Moon Records has come out.
High Moon.
Oh, High Moon. Excuse me, my typo error. Half Moon. It's just
it's
a habit.
High. It's the Summer of Love, right?
It's a
High
habit.
Moon.
Yeah.
And today is a full moon.
Full moon.
Oh, it is.
The May moon.
I think it's just a habit because Half Moon is up there.
That's right.
Half Moon Bay is up there.
Half Moon Bay, right?
Yeah.
High Moon Records.
Half Moon Bay. So now I can honestly say, this is probably the first time that I can ever say that you heard it first on KZSC when we previewed some of your songs before the album was released.
You sure did. Yeah.
In summer of 2017, I believe, was when you and I, or late summer 2017, when you and I spoke on the phone. And I'd say that's quite an honor for me to be able to lay claim to that. But I remember when we were talking, and I still think about this, how the songs, especially some of them, were new to me because they weren't on your release of field recordings. And so I said, that doesn't sound like it was from the 60s, you know? And I thought, well, one, it's a timeless song that you've written, and it was probably hard for you to hear that because it's your history, you know, and you sang it and you wrote it. But I think a lot of it also has to do with the time and where you are now and what you've done to the songs, what you've added to them, and your producer, Dan Shea, who has made it into a timeless piece of music doesn't sound dated, you know?
Right.
So do you think about if you had made the record back in the 60s, you know, what it would have sounded like? Because I know a lot of producers were going for, there was a certain marketable sound of the 60s. Do you think about how different the album would have been had you recorded back then?
Wow, that's interesting.
I never thought about that.
Anybody thoughts about that?
It might have been, still had more of a live sound to it, because the recordings back then, they weren't, you know, what they are now. So the clarity and stuff. So I don't know how that would have been. It would just pushed us forward to be noticed more, whatever the recording would have been at that time. But you know, time marches on, and here we are now doing these recordings with some of the best, you know, available recording techniques, and bringing that forth with those old songs, and trying to stay with that feel of the 60s at the same time.
Well, I want to say, too, that if I can interrupt a little.
Please.
We took a lot more risks. I think all the bands took a lot of risks then because everything was opened up. Everything was like, you know, when you were just like, we're not trying to do or be anything. We certainly weren't trying to keep the songs to under 3 minutes. I mean, you look at the Dead jams, but all of us, we were jamming at the Fillmore, and we'd just say, it feels good, let's keep going, everybody's dancing. It wasn't set the way it is now, you know, in the 70s and with the disco, and music's gone through so many different things where it cleaned itself up, so to speak, and I think that's what I see on this album when I hear a few like The Hermit, the medley there. That one calls to me really looking at what was going on in the 60s, and yet, it's totally listenable for now and meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that the length of songs and just the feel of like a little bit more freedom, I think, rather than what's going on now, although obviously with jazz and other things.
That's still happening.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I remember I read in the liner notes, Diane, that for the field recordings, it's bad, but buy it.
It's bad for you, but buy it.
Yeah. That the earlier years would have been the best time to record an album, but this was also before, you had this opportunity to record this album. Now, do you still feel that the same, or that it would have been better to record it, back in the 60s?
I think it's better now.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
It's a fine.
It's amazing.
Fine wine.
50 years later, then you get your record deal.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, it adds to our story at this time, because back then we didn't do it, and after all these years, here it is.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. How many bands get to do that?
Yeah.
So if it was back then, it might have gotten, who knows? We really don't know what level of,
exposure.
Exposure, thank you. What level of exposure it would have done.
Well, and you have the internet now. Look at the KQED made that video that has gone at least twice around the world by now, and I, along with many of your fans, have been following you on Facebook in this adventure, and I almost felt like I knew each of you before I had even met you, just because of reading about your story daily and the making of your record, which took quite a while because all of you were not in the same place at the same time. And then you had a whole bunch of guest artists that were just fabulous people everybody, I'm sure, wanted to participate in making the album, because it was just like back in the 60s, where the community supported you in many ways, and here the community shows up again and wants to participate, and it's like you just kind of picked up from where you left off almost.
It feels like that.
Yeah, it's very special. So Marla Hunt is who left the band after Mary Simpson, who is not here with us. We've got three. Said that she would never return. When she didn't, when the offer, I guess, was brought to you to make the album, she decided not to participate.
Well, she's just doing other creative things at this point. She's had the Fairfax Street Choir after the Ace of Cups, and they just released one of their archival records that had, archival material that has never been released. So she's working on that.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So it's really been kismet for you all, your whole story from the beginning to the end. It's almost like all of the people, the bands that you've known, the opportunities you have been given, and then not being able to follow through with that because of the touring problem with having your family and obligations there. So it's and then it's like it's almost like it was just meant to be this way,
right.
It does seem that way, huh?
Yeah.
I was going to say that in the old days, what we were kind of in a sense challenging the norms just by who we were, was just being all women playing rock music and doing what we did. But yeah, we okay?
Yeah, I think it's probably the headphones. It might be those headphones.
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
right. That's good. Put those down.
No squeaks.
But
that's what it is.
Now I think the what we're kind of sort of the in sense glass ceiling that we're pressing against or breaking through has to do with age as well as gender.
That's
right.
Because there are a lot of really amazing women playing music now, and all women or mixed bands, whatever like that. But what you don't see is in really a lot of professions, obviously, not just music, as women of our age or women past a certain age, whatever that is, depending on their profession, started getting put out to pasture or being, treated like their contribution isn't welcome anymore or interesting. And I think we're challenging that and having a good time doing it.
Yeah. Well, you're quite an inspiration, I think, not only for older women, but for young girls and women too. And I can only imagine that mothers are sharing this story with their daughters and kids, and
not just women either.
Right.
Boys and men.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of really great guys that are around us now that are just totally pitching in, and others that want to. And I think that for everybody in the society to see the elders doing what they love and vital.
That's me. Sorry.
That's really important. I mean, we, especially in these times where just because of the advances societally, and that people live longer. So people want to live longer in a vital way. And there's just sort of no end to what is possible if people can keep contributing their joy and their passion into our collective for as long as they live, God willing, or God is willing.
Well, isn't 70 the new, 50? Or?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me what's coming up. You guys have a short tour coming up, which is a big deal because you didn't actually have the opportunity to do that because you were all starting to have kids back in the 60s, right?
Yeah, we didn't do tours like this. We did shorter tours, but now...
And our tour is starting tonight.
That's right. That's right.
So tonight, of course, we're playing at the Rio Theater in Santa Cruz, and we're part of a Women Who Rock Our World event.
Yeah.
There's a panel first, and then we're going to do a little thing which we call the Her Story, which is telling a little bit of story with both prose and song and some video about how we met and some of the flow of our time together in the early days, and then we're just going to get on our full-on instruments and play a full set.
That sounds fabulous. I was wondering whether you were going to participate in the panel discussion, but this is kind of an in-between kind of thing.
Exactly.
Oh, that's extra special. And also, we should say that is a benefit for Monarch Family Services.
The great work that Monarch Family Services is doing with families and combating abuse and violence, and both working with families and having a safe house, and also even working with offenders or people that have caused harm and helping them transition out of that kind of pattern.
Yay.
And yes, and also as advocates for women in emergency situations when they have been abused or assaulted and end up in the hospital, and all you have are the police that you're having to talk to, which makes it kind of uncomfortable, I think. And so I think it's a great service. We also have, I just want to remind people that we're in our Spring Pledge Drive, and we also have 2 pairs of tickets that we'll be putting up for auction. So at the end of the test of time, we'll look at the 2 highest bids, the 2 highest numbers that come in. We're asking for a minimum of $50 for the pair because that's the base price of the ticket. And KZSC will donate half of the funds for those tickets raised to Monarch. So, if you come in and a pledge at 100 or 200, half of that goes to Monarch, half of that goes to KZSC. So,
nice. Whoever bids, the highest bidders on those, they get a hug from me, man. This is Denise. So if you're that bidder, you just come over and tell us that, and this is a really worthwhile thing. Both our wonderful public radio station here in Carroll and the Test of Time, and also Monarch. So we really want to give a high five to whoever comes in and contributes.
Yes, and so we're taking pledges online, and to do that, you go to kzsc.fm/give and make your donation that way. And then at the end of the show, the two highest bidders will contact you and get their name on the guest list, and then they can come find you.
Find Denise.
Get a hug. Get a hug from Denise.
She's the harmonica player. And bass.
And bass.
Yeah. But I'll hug you if I'm on the bass.
So what can you say about public radio in the years that you've been listening to music that you want to say about?
Well, the FM stations first kind of came on during the 60s, so there was only AM radio when we were first coming up, and we started to get some great FM stations. Public radio for me is my go-to source of everything. I read online. I don't have a television. I basically have never had a television, and I listen to my favorite stations I stream, and I listen. I drive up all the time from Los Angeles up to Nevada, where we practice, where we have our rehearsal studio, and so I do these long drives and listen to public radio, and really appreciate the news and the shows that present much more in-depth reporting than I get anywhere else. So I'm a huge public radio fan and supporter, and a sustaining supporter of my local station in LA.
Good for you. Yeah. That's what I like to hear.
Well, just think about it. Network television, like I get into it sometimes. I'm from Hawaii, and sometimes like, hello. There's more ads. It's like all the big companies that are selling you whatever the product is. And public radio, public television, we are the ads, the people. We have to keep it going. I'm totally a supporter of public radio and PBS public TV. It's where you see the real deal.
That's right. That's where you get the real news.
Yes.
The real news. Yeah. So I really, I was there, watching it all happen and listening and getting into the music and going out and hearing bands, and that's how I got into drumming. Because I'm listening to music and being there at the radio station, and what I was drawn to with was the drums,
Well, and that's pretty unique, I think, especially for a woman to. How did you just decided to just go get a set of drums and learn? So you.
Well, you should tell the story.
Yeah, I'm going to tell this story. Yeah. So it started first in grammar school, where I saw a marching band come through the recess on the outside, and I was, knocked out by the snare drummers. They're being able to, get those sticks to bounce so fast. You could hardly see the sticks even. So I was impressed with that. So they had a little music group there, and I asked to play the drums, and they said, "Oh, girls don't play the drums. Boys play the drums, but you could play the tambourine."
Oh, well, that I'm sure ruffled
that's grammar
the hair
school.
on
And
your
then
neck.
Junior high, same thing, just for boys. High school, just for boys. Sorry. So by the time I got out of high school and, was out there in the world just dancing a lot, because I love to dance, and that's when I got that aha moment again. And I realized, that's what's making me dance, and the 2 and the 4, I saw that was with the snare. So I went up to the drummer and asked if he could show me something. And he said, "Come back on a Sunday night and I'll show you something." And he showed me just one beat, had me do it, and then he had the band play that beat with me. So I got to play with the band, and every Sunday I would be there for, 6 months or something, doing that. Yes. And then, of course, I was hooked. And then we moved to another town where he'd be a DJ, and I go to another group, that's playing, and did the same thing until I, just kept doing that. And, I played in one band for a short time because the drummer took too many bennies and passed out, and I had been sitting in with them, so they were used to me. So I took over his slot until he got out of rehab. That was my first gig, and that was the only band I had played with before the Ace of Cups.
Oh,
so so all my
field training, basically.
Yeah, that's it. Field training, right?
Yeah.
So
that's the best kind, really.
Well, any kind is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
if you feel it, you know.
Well, it's neat that you were persistent and didn't give up. I mean, I know when I came along in junior high, and I wanted to be an architect, and they offered drafting classes in junior high and high school, and we had a woman who was a teacher for both classes, junior high and high school. So I was just really lucky because I had, a role model already right there in my field. So it made it a lot easier. But still, I was only 10% of the population in my class in college. So in that field. So
when we were in high school, the electives, like say junior high school electives, like women could take, or girls would take sewing and cooking, and guys would take wood shop and metal shop, and you could not take the other. Right.
Yeah.
You wanted to try and...
I never took that.
Yeah.
Well, just to put it in context, so listeners might not know, it's the early 60s. Late 50s and early 60s is the period of time we're talking about. I graduated in 1960, 61, 64. So this is the high school era, just before everything went wild.
Right.
Because Haight-Ashbury started the whole thing with the Beats going into the hippies, 65, 66. Everything happened. And then later on for women, Title IX, is it?
Yes.
When finally my daughters could get uniforms for the soccer team. I mean, they weren't allowed, and that's the late 1990s. So everything's been moving along slowly but surely.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, because we're coming up on time to leave, I wanted to ask a couple more questions. You worked on a new album, a second album. Did you finish that, or are you still working on it?
We're still working, but I would say it's probably 3/4 to 3/4 done now.
Okay. And you have a lot of more great guest artists.
We have Jackson
aboard.
Brown. We have Sheila E. and her whole family, or the whole Escovedo family. We have Bakiti Kumalo on bass, who is from the Ladysmith Black Mambazo, and Paul Simon. And a few other people too. Yeah, and we're not done. So there'll be probably a few more stellar friends from the old days. Our kind of rule thus far has been, or what's happened is that either our guests are either people we played with in the old days, or 1 degree off, like people who played with the people we played with. Right. Like Steve Kimmock, we didn't play with him then; he's somewhat younger, but he played with Jerry, Garcia and Bobby and all of the people we did play with. So. Yeah. We haven't had any young'uns playing on the album.
Well, are you writing new songs?
Yes, there's new songs on
fantastic.
Both of them.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
on the album that is already out. Pepper is new. The Well is new.
Okay.
There's a few other ones too.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just assumed they were all old, and
no,
because I didn't know your whole repertoire.
Right.
Not
fantastic.
just brand new, but like a song like "Pretty Boy," which we did a lot in the Fillmore and those era. That has been taken with some magic hands by Denise, Mary Ellen, and even the producer Dan, to give it that modern sound that you were referring to. So it's still the old song and the old ideas, and it just flies in a new way.
But there's new lyrics for it.
Lyrics.
Yeah, so it's not just
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've noticed that with some of the songs are combined differently. And one more question: you guys working on a documentary? Is there filming?
We've been being filmed for some years, and it's still in process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So it's about time for you guys to head on out because you have sound check. But I wanted to play the song Fantasy 1 and 4, and I wanted to hear you tell the story. It's an amazing story about how this song came about.
Right. So I want to say, by the way, that we have often had with us when we've been playing a guest member. There's the 4 of us, and then we've had a guest keyboard player, once in a while a guest guitarist with us. And the keyboard player who's usually been playing is she was a little bit ill this week. She's living in L.A., Giovanna and Bessie. And so jumping in over the last few days, and playing with us tonight will be our producer, Dan Shea.
Dan is going to be here.
He's going to be.
Great.
So, he doesn't have long hair. And
he's not
we're not going to put a wig on him.
You're not going to put a wig on him?
Not going to put a wig on him. But Dan Shea, we're so honored to play with him tonight. He's just such an amazing
he
musician.
Also participated on your album, too.
This music is really, his imprint and his love and his devotion for this music is everywhere in our record.
Okay.
And it's really, really great to get a chance to play with him.
Okay.
And so the song Fantasy 1 and 4, there was during the time of the Ace of Cups, I want to say this is probably 68, I'd written some songs that we hadn't introduced into, actually we never played them in the Ace of Cups. I was just working on some songs, and I made a tape on my reel-to-reel at home, and sent it to my friend and mentor, Ralph J. Gleason, who was the music columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle and founding editor of Downbeat and Rolling Stone, and co-founder of Rolling Stone. So he was an amazing musical force in those days. Mm-hmm. So I would send him stuff that I was working on. So I sent him this tape, and you can hear the tape. You can hear my bandmates like walking in and out of the room and slamming the door and talking. And it was a very rough little reel-to-reel tape. But I sent it with these 5 songs, and then I never thought about that tape again, or really didn't think about those songs. We never played them in the band, and it turns out that tape ended up in the vault at Fantasy Records because Ralph was working with Saul Zantz, who owned Fantasy by that time. Mm-hmm. And one of our first producer, the person who first produced our field recording album, found that tape in the Fantasy vaults, and he shared it with Dan Shea. So Dan Shea called us when we were in the middle of recording the new album. Dan Shea called me and said, "So what about that tape of yours that you sent to Ralph Gleason?" And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "So there's this tape of these 5 songs. They're great, So
he had it.
So he got it, and I hadn't heard it in 45 years.
Oh my God!
And he sent it to me. He sent me the tracks, and he had the idea of taking 2 of the songs. Mm-hmm. And saying, there's this song and this song, we could combine them. And that's what we did. And I kind of wrote some new lyrics, and some of the lyrics I kept. So on that track, on that tape, there was song 1 and 4 that we combined, and we got them out of the Fantasy vault. So we call it Fantasy 1 and 4.
I love that. It's a great story. Great album, and what I really appreciate, not only just all the beautiful cover art, but all of the stories about the information about the songs, and it's just a really great record that you guys have made. I'm so happy for you, and look forward to the next one, and we all look forward to your performance tonight. I'm so excited that you're here playing in Santa Cruz. I'm just tickled to death.
Yeah, we had to come see you, Carol.
Yes.
And when we get the second one done, we're going to have to debut it with you.
Yeah, you bet. I'd love to. So thank you, and we'll see you tonight.